You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel,
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
and we're your hosts for the show. And as usual, of course, we're coming here with yet more Star Wars discussion. And actually, it's good. The chats are hopping a little bit already. And I'm also happy to say the Grandmasters here today are our provider of inside information, which is actually good because then usually we always extend this stuff on the Discord, but sometimes it's nice to actually talk about it while we're talking. So I actually proposed in the chats, if you're watching this live, should this movie be scrapped? Because just as a little bit of background, there's a article going around yet again talking about another Star Wars movie suffering the fate of, well, a lot of Star Wars projects. And keep in mind too, this is something that always interests me. And I know a lot of times these different websites or whatever do this for clickbait, but you know, they'll basically take these projects that are even just rumored projects, and then if they don't happen, then it just they come out with these other clickbait articles. But this one, of course, was on track. This one, I mean, at least, I don't remember. Do you remember if this thing actually made it through its first draft or whatever? Like, 'cause remember they were talking about it, and then, um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, there's
everything,
a
and then
script done.
so there was a script. Yeah, there was a script. That's what I thought. There was a script done
Mm-hmm.
for this movie. And I don't know if there was any like shooting dates or anything that because I remember we were talking about this movie quite heavily for a while, and then we didn't really get any new news, and then, just seemed to go silent. And then of course the Mandalorian and Grogu started taking over a little bit. And yeah, this is the first that we've heard of it. So I thought, you know what? This thing has come back up. Why don't we talk about this? So let me go to the chats really quick and just see, because I had proposed a question. Look, this thing's rumored to have been killed yet again. I think the origin of this one came from Kathleen Kennedy's exit interview.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she said something to the effect that she didn't really know that, the project for now was dead, but who knows what can happen in the future. Um, so, I mean, let me go to the chats because I basically said, look, should this movie be scrapped? And so Ted, of course, getting in there right in the beginning, says it's a great idea in the right hands only, though. And then he goes on to say, would rather see it as a 7-season animated series. Personally, others will disagree. Yeah, I'm not one of those people, though.
Yeah, neither
Um,
am I necessarily.
yeah, I mean, you and I pretty much feel the same way on this. Now, it's funny because I'm actually in the middle. So we got a lot of Actually, we got a lot of views on our last show, and we've been getting a lot of comments too. Oh man, I don't remember who it is. It's one of our regular viewers, but not necessarily regular chatters, that's been going in this whole discussion thread with me. And you too. I mean, if you want to jump in there at some point. But basically talking about how Star Wars should be theatrical pretty much only. And, maybe give up on a lot of these TV series. And I understand where he's coming from. And I do agree, even to a certain point, depending on what the story is. But you and I always talk about the fact that there's just certain stories that seem to lend itself more to a more lengthy, you know, series, maybe on television that you can have multiple episodes, multiple seasons. You could basically tell the story over a long period of time. So you would pretty much still feel that way for a lot of Star Wars stories, right?
Yeah, depending on the actual project. I mean, there are certain projects that I think require um, more time to flush out. And but everything doesn't need to be live action either.
Right.
Because I think that sometimes, it gets to you start getting that fatigue. But having like something where you get a good animated series, where you can tell like, hey, like We're coming up on Maul, for example, or we had the Clone Wars, Rebels. Those were great um, opportunities, and see what you can do is see those can launch your films because it's like again you have it's almost like having a book where you have the book that really sets the framework, and then now when you do your live action film, okay, well, if you want to know all this exposition, all the the nuance stuff, yeah, we got a whole animated series of 7 season series that you could watch that will catch you up with all the details. But here we are, and now we're moving forward.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because I brought up the books as well. I said, well, by that, I mean, whether it's a animated series, live action series, or a book, what difference does it make? I mean, the whole by that perspective that he was having, it's like, well, the EU wouldn't exist then. If Star Wars is
Hmm.
only a theatrical type of media. Now, I'm sure he was excluding the books and comics, but I did bring up that the books and comics have arguably better stories in some cases than some of the shows and even films that we've seen. So I've been a big fan of, hey, why don't you guys start mining the old
Hmm.
expanded universe? Now, obviously, and they still do. I mean, they still are bringing in characters from the expanded universe, but I don't know. I mean, now that they have an extensive new canon series of books, I would say fine, make those. I mean, I'm not necessarily married to the expanded universe. It's just an example, or the new comics they have. I did the whole War of the Bounty Hunters as an example. Now, that's something that I think could actually make a really good animated or live action series. You can actually either kick it off or wrap it up with a film. But I think, it's almost like how the Clone Wars is, right? I mean, if they were trying to, and this is the point that I brought up, if they were to try to make a series of movies to cover what the Clone Wars did, now, granted, you could arguably say, well, okay, now you wouldn't necessarily have all those filler episodes, like the infamous droid adventure one that I was, where, where they spent, man, it must have been like three,
Hmm.
four,
3.
5 episodes of the droids trying to find their way back home. And you're like, okay, this is okay for one, maybe 2 episodes, but can we get back to the Obi-Wan Anakin, like the actual storyline here? So, yeah, you would eliminate that, but by the same token, you wouldn't be able to get into a lot of the nuances. And if they were going to take their time between movies, even a couple of years, it would take like 10 years or something to get all that out. And it would be one storyline. So I do think that the television shows, I do think that the animated series, they all serve a purpose. And that's so to Ted's point, I mean that's what this started out being, right? Commenting on Ted's thing. We'll get to Grandmaster in a second. Um, basically I think that that would be a really good framework for that. And again, I mean I get it. There's some people that when we put stuff out there, whether we're putting it out there on a show or on the Discord or whatever, some of you guys are going to agree with what we're saying, some of you aren't. Fine. It's basically just what we think. And I'm not necessarily married to any one idea either. And I don't think you are either. Okay. So Grandmaster has a little bit of information about the scripts of these. He says one draft was submitted by the writer, which goes to what we were saying, but he says the draft that was submitted was very risky and bold. So
Hmm.
I'm curious, risky in what way exactly? Because this is one of those things, and again, we're talking about the Dawn of the Jedi movie that James Mangold is supposed to do. Is if it's not canceled, it's definitely on the back burner. Um, but it was one of those things where it was intriguing in the sense of they were going to go into the origins of the Jedi and the Force and all that stuff. So I could see what Grandmaster's talking about. He basically finishes by saying the submitted draft was reviewed and considered very risky and bold. So I don't know. I'd be curious in what way because I can see that meaning different things. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
it says during her essay interview from Lucasfilm, Kennedy said Jim Mangold and Bo Willimon, I'm sorry, uh, wrote an incredible script, but it's definitely breaking the mold, and it's on hold. It's not just my decision, especially when I've got a foot out the door. Anything's possible if someone's willing to take a risk. That's coming from good old Kathleen Kennedy.
Hmm.
So, I mean, the last time we heard that this type of rhetoric, we got the Last Jedi. Just saying.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a fair point, man. I mean, look,
I'm just saying.
there are different
Just
schools of
saying.
thought on the Last Jedi. I mean, we know that Ronaldo, wherever, I hope he's still alive. I mean, he hasn't. This is the longest stretch that we have not heard from Ronaldo. So I hope he's okay. But he was one, of course, of the examples of one of our viewers that was an extreme proponent of the Last Jedi. You and I talk about how the fact we didn't hate it, but there were a lot of problems with it. Um, yeah, I think that in this sense, though, and this is something that I would probably point out here. Yes, you're right. We haven't heard this since The Last Jedi, but you also have to consider the fact that this is like 25,000 years or something crazy before, I don't know, I think it was before The Phantom Menace.
Mhm.
Um, you can, I don't necessarily mind risky and bold. The only problem that I have, because on one hand, the positive thing you can say is, hey, at least it's not messing with our some, beloved characters that have been around for decades, which was the case in The Last Jedi. However, you are running the risk of, I don't necessarily know if I like risky and bold when it comes to, hey, we're going to talk about the origin of the Jedi and the Force. It's, I mean, that could be just as scary because, again, anything that they do, if they're going to make a project like this, is going to pretty much cement everybody coming up with projects afterwards to these rules that they're beholden to now. I mean, it's going to forever dominate.
True.
I mean, that was part of the problem that the expanded universe had when they came out with the very brilliant Yuuzhan Vong thing. I mean, sure, the worst thing you could say is, okay, there was a lot of filler in there, and maybe that storyline went on a little too long. Like they probably could have condensed it down a little. But it was a great story. But the problem is the universe was in such a tattered state and such disarray and nearly unrecognizable that it was really difficult at that point. Like, what do you do now? Everything is so broken and so, I mean, this whole emotional weight, you can't just go back to telling these fun adventures after all that. You have this mess of a universe now. So the EU writers more or less painted themselves into a corner. They ended up having to go like years and years into the future in order to start telling stories again because it was just too much of a mess. And you run that risk, of course, before because, are they going to end up retconning stuff? Is it going to create more plot holes? Is it, I mean, there's a lot of things that it can do. Now, Grandmaster says it was sent back to Bo, the writer, with recommendations, and another draft wasn't submitted by the timeline given. Which, I mean, I could see why. It's a monumental task, right?
Mhm. Well, I mean, here's my thing. I think I agree with you with the point that you made that if you're going to talk about something like and I mean, and I kind of want them to. I mean, I would love to see that them talk about the origins of the Force, the origins of the Jedi. But again, even with especially with Dave Filoni at the helm, now I think you see what they did with the High Republic. That's all I'm saying with the
Well,
acolyte.
but here's the thing, and this is where we can get into a little bit of discussion, particularly with our audience. There's already an origin story that the expanded universe had created that was fine, that everybody accepted, that did not trap anybody at all, and it also led nicely into the Old Republic. In fact, I think a lot of those stories were extensions of it because once the Old Republic stories, particularly the video games and all that, became popular, they started messing with the origins of it. And there was a story, I don't remember where it was. I think it was a book, could have been a comic, but it was talking about, it might have even been part of the Knights of the Old Republic lore. It might have been included in the video game. I don't remember everything. I know there's been several things about it, but talked about the very first Jedi discovering the Force. It talked about how the Jedi fought with swords, and then eventually they figured out lightsabers and developed a style and all that. And it's fine. It's like people don't need to keep reinventing the wheel. You could take the thing that's already out there. And by the way, these stories have been out there. Granted, they may have been forgotten. Like modern audience, look, I read a lot of it and I don't remember everything about it. But the point is, they've been out there. They've been in our purview, so to speak. All they
Yeah.
have to do, I mean, I'm not saying you have to adapt the material, but you could take the basic rules and the parameters that were set in that and then just put them in a new story. You don't have to do, I'm just so tired of this whole, we got to be risky and we got to be bold and we got to reinvent. Now, hey, for all I know, maybe that's what they were trying to do, right? Maybe they were taking that stuff and they're just trying to put it in a bold, you know, new story. Bold, I don't, doesn't really trip me too much. Risky, uh, that term maybe, that term can mean a few things.
Well, I mean, there's several things, when it comes to Star Wars, because, you know, let's face it, it's not, um, I don't think necessarily Star Wars has to be limited to, and it seems like, at different junctures, Star Wars isn't limited to just, a governmental thing, right?
Hmm.
So, you know, if we're going forward into the future, let's say post post Rise of Skywalker, you know, everybody's trying to reestablish, okay, the new republic, the government, Rey is trying to establish the Jedi Order, so on and so forth. I mean, I get that. However, I think there's stories that can be told that are very compelling without there having to be this whole the government is trying to is evil and is trying to, attack everybody, and I think with when you go further back, you kind of have like, all right, well, what were the issues back then? Like what would you fight about? And really it's a lot of it will be philosophy. It's like, okay, it's all about power, but it's like, okay, who gets to dictate it? Like, all right, no different than I think that's what made the Civil War for the Avengers so good was because it was more about like, hey, you guys have to be held responsible for the things that you guys are doing as superheroes. And, there has to be a checks and balance thing. And like, Captain America's like, well, yeah, I understand that, but okay, when the world blows up, like who who else is gonna do it? You Weinberg. So it's kind of like, all right, when you look at Star Wars, I could see the whole, okay, the origins of the beginning of the Sith, because it's like they think that their way is the best way as far as how to use the force, how to wield it. The Jedi kind of come up with their philosophy of like, no, we should use it for peace and use it for enlightenment and all those different things. It's no different than, what we watched in Cobra Kai. All of them were doing martial arts. Everybody had their own view and their own take on how it should be utilized. The old Cobra Kai with Kreese, he's all trying to be, just dictatorship about it. Johnny's just trying to like, hey, I just don't want you to be wusses out here. Daniel's just like, look, I just want you to be harmonious and peaceful with people. Only use it in the as a last resort. You got all these different ideals, and I think that's what makes Star Wars able to flourish in a bunch of different ways. And you can tell a bunch of different stories out of it without, trapping people into like, okay, this has to be that way, this has to be this way. I just think that it should be done, but like Ted said, it just has to be put in the right hands.
Well, and I mean, again, my main point, and I mean, all that's true, and I think that that's the thing. When you go back during this particular time period, you're that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with the origins of these two philosophies and all that. My
Mm-hmm.
point is, they're already there. Like these
Oh,
stories are
I agree.
already there. Now, I mean, again, and I'm not asking for adaptation. I mean, it couldn't hurt,
I was
but
about to say, even if you did that, I mean,
yeah. I
I
mean,
don't
you
necessarily see a problem with that. To be honest with you,
well, there really isn't, but I'm just saying I can understand because again, there's been a lot of really cool stories that are out there, but for whatever reason, Lucasfilm under Disney just does not want to do it. And I mean, I can understand to a degree because they're probably like, look, these stories are already out there. They're like 30 years old, whatever, whatever. We want to tell some new stuff that might be, who knows what they think. I
I, here's,
honestly,
here's my thing. Let's just face it. Like, unless you were an avid reader back, like when you were, like in the early '90s when you were, reading the EU, I would say vast majority of Star Wars fans today may not even recall
oh, that's
that
not
story. Or
true. That is not true. You look at a lot of like Star Wars stuff, a lot of people clamor for the EU. And they're
no, I'm
very
not
well
saying.
versed in those stories. In fact, there's numerous Facebook groups and other groups dedicated to the EU. So they're not, you would think that being, you know, as old as they are, but again, you look at it, okay, yeah, the EU started in 91, but it went all the way up to like 2011, 2012. So, I mean, it's not like,
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But there's so many books. What I'm saying is, there's so many books that have come out. There's so many stories that were told out of the EU. What I'm saying is that if you're trying to usher in this new Star Wars, right? I think that you can definitely cherry pick, or you can adapt, whichever they choose, and I think it will be fine. Because I mean, I don't think everybody remembers every single detail. I mean, I think like in the vast majority of like the casual fan, like the
well, if you're
casual
talking
fan
about
is,
casual fans, yeah, I would
and
agree
that's
with
and
that.
that's and that's what I'm going. Like the
These
casual
casual
fan,
fans don't even know,
don't
like,
even know that's what I'm saying. Like so that, but
but
majority
again, I
of
I just think that Star Wars has to stop. They just have to stop trying to cater to the casual fan. I personally am kind of tired of hearing about the casual fan. I mean, I understand it from a marketing perspective because I mean, obviously, they want a vast, like, I guess they want as big of a market share as they could possibly get, right? I mean, you want to put butts in the seats. I mean, that's ultimately what you want to do. You're not like trying to have them pass some sort of litmus test of, how big of a fan they are. You want to tell stories that basically appeal to everybody. And one of the arguments that people have tried to use unsuccessfully against me, I might add, is the fact that they'll say something to me like, well, if you think about it, there have been casual fans ever since the beginning. And
yeah,
that's true. But see, the problem is, and this is something that you and I have brought up many, many times whenever we're talking about them bringing up new projects. And that is that over time, the franchise has gotten popular. And because of the world building, because of the characters, because of a lot of things, each subsequent decade has picked up numerous hardcore fans, and now it's like something that you brought up. I don't remember which show it was, but it wasn't terribly long ago. where you basically made the comment of this franchise people have basically abandoned. A lot of people have left. It's not the bulletproof franchise it once was.
Hmm.
The
Right.
people who are left are the hardcore fans. So
Oh yeah.
cater to them. Now, getting back to this part of it, though, the the stories that are out there too, a lot of them are fairly recent because what happened is when they established, because there were books on Sith Wars, which is another thing you can get into. So you tell the because basically that's what they did. They told the origin of the Jedi, then they told the origin of the Sith, and they went into the Sith Wars, and there was like a lot of that was covered in comics. Some of it was covered in novels. They could just simply kind of like what you were saying. Cherry pick stuff. What I'm saying is they don't have to reinvent it.
Oh, I agree.
That's
I
that's
agree
what
100.
I'm
percent
trying to basically say. Look,
Hmm.
just don't reinvent it. Don't try to tell a socially relevant story. That's and
Well,
reinvent
yeah. I mean, my
something
thing
that's
is,
out there.
if it already's worked, why would you go away from it? So my thing
Exactly.
is,
That's my
like, if
point.
you got books already, like Bloodline, you got Lords of the Sith, you got, I Jedi, you got all these other stories, that have worked and people already know about them already.
And
You
none of that
know,
even deals with this.
right? I'm just saying, Splinters of the Minds are like we all these stories have been successful already. All I'm saying is that they could have just been made into some sort of medium, visual medium, whether it be live action, animation, or film.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They could do a lot with some of the
It
stuff
was
that's there. And honestly, I
it
think
was
that
saving
would
the
be a smarter
headache.
move.
It was
That
saving the
too.
headache because they already, like, you can't argue with something that, like, okay, like, fans. I highly doubt fans would be like. The only way I can see is if you like completely changed it, then I can see that. But if you're keeping to the or pretty close to the mark of the actual story, like, I don't think fans would have a problem with it because they liked it from the beginning. It's as long as the people know how to act and, you know, like, just the basic things. But
Well, you're
yeah,
basically because, like I pointed out last on the last show, these expanded universe books in particular have been on the New York Times bestseller list. Like
exactly.
most of them when they were released. I mean, it's not like it's a small audience, number one, because that's another thing that people try to say. Oh, well, it's somewhat of a fringe audience. Mm-mm. No, most Star Wars fans, I would venture to say, even some of the casual ones, by the way, have read some of the books. Not so much the comics, but at least some of the books. Because you don't get on the New York Times bestseller list because only the hardcore, niche fans are buying it. It appeals actually to a slightly different audience because you have people who, basically enjoy reading. It's a hobby. Maybe they like sci-fi fantasy. So you have another audience in there. And it's basically like what you're alluding to. You have these built-in stories that are already proven to work. All you got to do is make them. I mean, obviously you got to adapt them because
Hmm.
you always have to, write a screenplay, right? You can't just if they were smart,
Right.
what they would do is they would adapt it. They would get who would let's say they were taking, something that James Lucino wrote. It's like, okay, get James Lucino to be part of adapting it to a screenplay.
Yeah. Or Claudia Gray. Or yeah.
Any of the
Exactly.
authors.
Yep.
There's at least 4 or 5 regular ones that, are considered the the higher end ones. All right, let me get to some of these chats. Grandmaster, of course, has some more information on the status of this film. He says, my understanding is that this project isn't officially canceled or shelved. Main issue is that James and Bo are committed to other projects. Project is not their priority at this time. Goes on to say the door is still open for more drafts to be submitted. Unfortunately, none have arrived. He goes on to say, unlike other projects that are canceled and shelved, this one isn't. And then, of course, Dom joins us. I approve of this cancellation. I wouldn't expect anything less. Uh, Ted goes on to say Star Wars needs to stop having creatives that are not totally focused in Star Wars. If they have other projects, then Disney Lucasfilm needs to move past them. Star Wars fans, customers deserve creatives to be dedicated to Star Wars. And then Dom agrees with Ted. He says it would be even better if Star Wars ended entirely. Oh, oh
Well,
man, I love doing our show.
well, the thing is about the projects. I mean, that's happens with a lot of films. It's not just Star Wars, but it's like a lot of franchises deal with directors who are juggling multiple projects at one time. It's just kind of
Yeah, you didn't have
part
this
of the
like
gig.
if it's George Lucas that's still making them. I mean, obviously that's his thing, right? That's all he's
Right.
going to do.
That, yeah, maybe Indiana Jones.
Right. And maybe the occasional thing like Howard the Duck or
Right.
oh, wow, I just blanked on it. What was the
Red Tails.
yes, thank you. So I mean, but you know what though? I mean, I'll say this. I will say this. Okay? That is not entirely a bad criticism. Because on one hand, yes, I understand that look, it happens in every film. Well, not every film, but I mean, it happens in a lot of projects. Non-Star
Mhm.
Wars, not even franchise projects. Hey, so and so
Right.
wasn't available. We're going to move this project, forward like or back 6 months so that way we can accommodate the directors so they can come on board. Or sometimes it's just like, hey, this guy wasn't going to be this actor isn't going to be available. Let's recast the role and do something else. I mean, that does happen all the time. But again, this is something I have to stress. This is Star Wars. Star Wars is not even like other franchises. And it would be nice if the people who are making Star Wars would actually learn that. It's something Lucas understood, being the guy that invented all this. You
Well,
cannot
the
treat
difference.
them like you can't treat this like Marvel.
Well, here's the thing, though. The only pushback I would give is like if Star Wars were living up to the old standard, I would agree. But since they failed so much,
Well,
no one takes them
actually,
serious.
yeah, right. I mean, they're not even acting like the real Star Wars franchise, right? So, I mean, why not? Why not
I
just
mean,
be like,
I mean, my thing is like, yes, it still makes $1 billion, but I mean, like, they and how those in Hollywood know, like, okay, yeah, it made $1 billion. However, what's the real thing? Oh, are people really like? Yeah, there's a bunch of chatter, and a lot of people aren't, clamoring for this.
I'll tell you this, man. This goes into the discussion that we're having on the Discord. Now, Grandmaster, glad he's on tonight. He had just posted something about, hey, listen, with all the internal metrics, with everything going on, Mandalorian and Grogu is perfectly on track. I forgot how much he said it was supposed to be, but everything's on track. Which I didn't have a chance to respond to this yet, but I'll just respond to it now. My response is you can have all the internal metrics you want until you see. Now, I will, let me preface this though by saying, look, I know that a lot of these marketing guys, like that's their job. I mean, a lot of times these guys are pretty dead on with their projections, right? It's no different than business, like general
Mhm.
business. I mean, if you're saying, "Hey, we're projected to make this much revenue," you know, by third quarter of 2026, you can bet that a lot of research, a lot of time, and a lot of like, psychology and behavioral stuff and maybe some polls and a bunch of like research based things as far as audience and engaging audience
Bribery,
reaction,
right?
bribery. Yes. A lot of this stuff probably went into it. And so I can hang with that. And I mean, honestly, I hope it does because honestly, the Mandalorian and Grogu needs to be hyper successful. Now, I have backed off a little on that statement slightly because I think that Starfighter, which is coming in on the heels of it, can actually, like, let's just say that Mandalorian and Grogu does not do what everybody thinks it's going to do, and it doesn't bring Star Wars back, and maybe, I mean, I don't know. I think it actually looks cool, so I'm somewhat amped up about it, and I hope that it lives up to what it is. Grandmaster seems to think that it will, but if let's just say it doesn't, I think Starfighter has a wide enough um, appeal that it could technically make up the difference because Andor actually did quite a bit. A
I
lot of
think
numbers went up after Andor.
I think Mandalorian and Grogu has it can't just be good. I think it has to be amazing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think it has to be like flat out like, wow, that was amazing. Now, Starfighter can be good, but Mando and Grogu has to because at least like okay, you give me an amazing project and then you give me another one like, okay, that was good. Like it wasn't Mandalorian Grogu, but I mean it was really good though. Like I think people that kind of I mean, of course we all want them to be all like all A's. If you get an A plus and a B, okay, I'm good with that. But one can't be, even if Mandalorian Grogu was an A plus and then uh Starfighter ends up being a B minus C plus, people are gonna still like, I don't know, because it's still not certain. It's just still not enough consistency for people. But if you start putting out things that are like, okay, let's make sure everything that we put out is rock solid, then I think, but that's why I said it has to start with Mandalorian and Grogu. That has to set the tone because now, even going into Starfighter, even if Starfighter is amazing, okay, so is the next one going to suck? And then
Well,
it's good. The next one's going to be great again. Like you're still going to have that. You're still going to have
no,
that argument.
right. I know what you're saying, but here's the thing. I think it would depend on how bad of reviews it actually got. I think what because what you I think that if it comes out and it just say it's mediocre, right? And I'm not talking about the quality of the movie itself, by the way. I'm talking about the reaction. I'm strictly talking about the reaction.
Mhm.
If the reaction to the movie is anything less than stellar, it comes out, it's like, and to quote the phrase that everybody's using now, it's mid, right? That's
Right,
that's what
right.
everybody thinks of it. I'm gonna appreciate that one. If it basically comes out and that's pretty much the reaction it has. I mean, I would say that then Starfighter comes out and everybody loves it. I think that could be enough. Where I think that it might not be enough, and where I would totally agree with what you're saying, is if the reaction to Mandalorian and Grogu were like The Last Jedi. Where everybody was like, "Oh, this sucks. She ruined my childhood," and it's like people start to really, which I don't really see that happening because I think the worst that this movie will get reaction or review wise would just be, hey, there's two things I could see that would be a negative review. One, people would go, hey, this is just season 4 in the theater. That's if you remember when Star Trek Insurrection came out, the biggest criticism to that movie wasn't necessarily that it was bad. They just said it felt like a giant TV episode. It didn't feel like a cinematic experience. It didn't feel like a movie. It felt like a TV episode that they showed in the theater. So that's one thing that I think maybe it has a danger of being levied against it. Now, I personally felt that the trailer gave us somewhat of a cinematic vibe, more so. And I mean, look, a lot of it too is just don't shoot on the volume. Stop that. That's why Andor, I think, partially did really well because they actually used, I mean, it's not like they didn't use it at all, but I mean, they shot on a lot of practical locations. The second thing that I think possibly that it could be levied against it besides it feeling like a giant TV episode? Is it just, it was sort of like more of the same. It didn't really move the story forward. It just, it was just kind of there. Those are really the only two things. I don't know. I mean, do you agree or what? Before I get to Dom's stuff.
Um, yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, like, I think if it definitely needs to have a film vibe. It definitely needs because that was the thing that we said when we started watching it on television. It was like, oh, okay, it kind of it has a very cinematic vibe or look to it, but now because we're used to that look, the look on screen has to be even more.
Right.
Like you really have to dial in, like the lighting, the cinematography. And that's why I said that's the cool thing. Like some of the cinematography that we've seen already looks really good. So I'm like, okay, but
Well, here's
you
the
know,
thing, and this goes into what you're saying. It can't just have a cinematic vibe, it has to be cinematic.
exactly.
Yeah. That's it. All right, so Dom has a few funny comments. He says that this is being shelved, which it's not, but you got to tune in earlier. He says, "Who gave the okay for Acolyte?" He's saying it won't bring Star Wars back. Only Luke can bring Star Wars back. Now, I don't entirely disagree with what he's saying. I don't entirely agree because I think there are more paths to bringing Star Wars back, but I definitely think if you give us like some post Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker type stuff and focus on that aspect of it, it would be cheap. Like it would be the easy way out, it's the dark side. But I mean, I do think it would be a shortcut though to generating a lot of interest very quickly.
I mean, yes. I mean, it's almost like the Vader thing. Like when in doubt, break glass. Show Darth
Vader or
Vader.
Palpatine.
And
hmm
um, I guess depending on what story you're trying to tell, it just has to make sense that Luke is there. You know, um,
Well, I mean, it would if they decided to focus, which again is part of what the expanded universe did, starting with the Zahn novels and even going into some other stuff. If you basically made the movie like, listen, we're gonna make a movie on what Luke Skywalker did immediately after Return of the Jedi. I mean, it's not, hey, this doesn't, this isn't like one of those things like his appearances in The Mandalorian where, hey, we got to make sure it makes sense, you know, and which of course it did, but it's you don't have to really necessarily focus on that. You're just basically saying, look, we're gonna make a movie on what Luke Skywalker is doing now during this time period. You know, again, I
as
mean, I
long as you
think it
don't
would
screw
be
it up.
well, yes. I mean that, but look, it depends on who it is, obviously. But look at what they did with him in season 2 of The Mandalorian. It's proof that they could do this without screwing it up. Like there's a precedent
Mm,
there.
that was a what 7-minute scene.
You're not you're only thinking of that scene. You're not thinking of all the Ahsoka scenes, the scenes that he had with Grogu. I mean, all throughout season 2. He had a couple of key scenes. Now, of course, we could talk about the effectiveness of the AI in those scenes
See, and
because
that's the other thing too. Is like I think you have to if you're gonna get a Luke Skywalker, you have to get someone that everyone relatively universally accepts is the new Luke Skywalker. Number
I don't
one.
think so, and I'll tell you why. Because now AI is getting to the point where it can do it. Look at the Val Kilmer thing that's about to come out. So, I mean, when you factor that in, that now it's actually moved into that realm. If you gave it another 3 to 5 more years, I don't think you'll have any problems. I'm not
I
necessarily. I
don't
mean,
know.
look, you could debate on whether or not it's a good idea or not. I mean, for me, I'm fully, especially with the way technology in it is moving, and especially seeing some of the early Val Kilmer stuff. I'm I'm on board with it. My whole thing is like, look, if you're gonna involve the the original characters with the way it's been moving, as long as you get the permission from the estate or from them if they're still alive, like what they did with James Earl Jones, basically,
All
or
right.
Carrie Fisher's estate. It's like more power to them. Do it because that's what we're used to. I mean, recasting is dangerous because, like you said, you got to get somebody that everybody accepts. And I mean, unless they started making a ton of projects with them, I don't really think that they're gonna accept anybody. Of course, people said that
Well,
about
yeah,
Captain Kirk too, and I mean, we accepted Chris Pine. Of course,
yeah. I mean,
that was also like because they wanted to get Leonard Nimoy. They actually wanted William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy in that, but Shatner wouldn't do it because it wasn't a big enough part or something. So Nimoy did it. So they had to do the whole, hey, this is Spock Prime versus, they basically had the two different timelines pretty much. So the
mhm.
original, but again, I mean, that's kind of a world between worlds thing.
Yeah. I mean, you could again, like I said, you could make that, but I think it's just it's people are going to have a different opinion of action movies with AI. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know. Like it's one thing if you have like someone speaking or you're just doing a little thing, but it's like when you start having like full on action scenes and things like when you just know that it's you're not watching real actors and it just kind of takes away from it. And I think it kind of takes away from the enjoyment a little bit just because you know that it's artificial.
Well, I mean, I honestly think, and I already kind of view it this way. It it's a suspension of disbelief because the characters aren't dead, the actors are. It's no different. I mean, I think people are gonna look at it like animation. It's just another form of animation. I mean, look at what they're trying to do with animation and what they have been doing. It's becoming more photorealistic every year. In fact, the new Darth Maul series is even using a different and more modern type of animation than even the stuff that we've been getting from Lucasfilm. So it's like, what is their goal? More photorealistic animation. So I mean, that's all AI is really going to end up becoming, and not to mention the fact that, we already, I mean, look, when you read a book that talks about Han Solo and Luke Skywalker, who are you picturing in your head? You're picturing Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill. So, I don't know. I mean, you're probably right in the sense that I'm sure some people maybe it might be hard to get past, but I certainly would much rather see really well done AI versions of that stuff versus recast actors. Especially because then you don't have to worry about it. Because let's just say that you get a Sebastian Stan or somebody like that in the role, right?
Hmm.
What are you going to do when that person ages out or maybe they're not available? That's, I think it's a really interesting time that we're living in because it's not even so much as a technology part, but, franchises didn't used to go on this long. Star Wars is going on like 50 years. I mean, that's unheard of.
Well, that's why that, but that's yet another reason why we need to move away from the Skywalker saga.
Well,
I
yeah, I
mean,
mean, I
don't
would
get me
agree with
wrong. I
that.
mean, like we all love to see Luke, and sure, you could tell some stories why you got Sebastian Stan around or whoever you get to, play him. But what I'm saying is, it's like, okay, eventually we're going to have to move on. We're not. It's not like Star Wars is, you know, Luke Skywalker the animated series. That's not what this is.
No, you
It's
once you once
Star
compared
Wars.
it. You once made the comparison with James Bond, where you said, with James Bond, the problem with James Bond is that that's the focus of that series, right? You can't just go, "Hey, let's talk about 006 now and let's see their adventures, right?
Right.
Whereas Star Wars is a big enough universe that you can tell a bunch of different stories in that universe, which has already been proven, by the way, with Andor and, things like that. And, everybody goes, yeah, but Andor was, a character or whatever that they brought back for that. I'm like, well, yeah, but he was just invented like a few years ago. It's
Right.
like, it's not
Right.
like a legacy character, It's a character that's relative. I mean, granted, it's like, you know, like 10 years or whatever old now, but I mean, that's fairly recent in Star Wars times. So I mean, it's a really interesting thing because I mean, on one hand, and for me, I wouldn't mind seeing both. I mean, what I would like to see it for is if they could ever start adapting some of the stories of the expanded universe. Now, the other thing you could do, and we've talked about this before too, is you could take the stories from the expanded universe that maybe had the original characters, but just have it be different characters. The stories are the same, the characters are different. You could do that too. Especially now that you have so many, people. I mean, I've even said, look, they could have, if they didn't want to use Han, Luke, and Leia, you could actually tell the story of Heir to the Empire and all that with nobody wants this. I
Finn,
preface
yeah,
that.
Finn Poe and
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
right.
Ray, Finn, Poe, all those guys, right? I mean, I mean, nobody wants to. Nobody, probably nobody wants to see that, but, you could do it. Thrawn, the whole thing. You could do that. You could actually directly adapt Heir to the Empire and all that. Not saying you should. Just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing.
Absolutely.
So I mean, it's wide open. I think in that. Okay, let's see. Um, Dom has a couple of negatives, and then he's got a good point. And he says, "Can't wait for this Mando movie to flop." He said, "It would be hilarious." But then he talks about this. He says the AI is kind of awkward. I see Daryl's point. Doesn't feel authentic. At the same time, I don't want to recast. And that's why the happy medium between that is just wait a few years. Because every passing moment,
All right, Palpatine.
you know, AI is
Make
getting
ourselves
better
more
and
your
better.
servant.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I am
All
sitting
right.
in like this chair that's sort of like his little throne. Only of one of
It
the
was
high
so
back ones.
it was funny. I just happened to be on Facebook one day and I saw like some guy. He had his, they always do these weird movie theater rooms for their homes,
Oh yeah.
and this guy did a whole Star Wars movie theater. It was sweet, like how the doors open, like the ones from the movies and everything.
Oh, that's cool.
But it was I forgot how many seats it held, but they had all these great seats. And then right at the top in the middle, he had Palpatine's throne chair, and I was like, oh, "That's sweet. I've never seen that before." And
That
it's
is
fully functional.
cool.
It swivels and everything. I'm like, "All right, that's pretty sweet."
Well, if you're gonna do it right. That's what I
Right.
always say. I mean, it's that's something that I've actually. I wish I had the space in the house, but because that's something that I think would actually be kind of cool. I've known a few people who have done it. They get the whole movie theater seats and like the really
Oh
nice
yeah.
ones and oh yeah. But yeah, I mean, just I think that again, Grandmaster's probably right. The movie will probably come back at some point because even if it doesn't come back in this form with James Mangold, it's a story that's gonna need to be told at some point theatrically.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's also an untapped resource, right?
Yeah. It's a gold mine. It's waiting to be exploited.
But we'll have to see. And again, look, we first of all, it's like what you and I have said. First, we got to get past the Mandalorian and Grogu, and then Starfighter.
True.
We have to see, if there's even is it going to flop? like Dom thinks, is it going to be a wild raving success? Like what Lucasfilm and Grandmaster obviously think. I mean, we'll just have to see. Whatever it is, you can be sure that we'll be there to discuss it in detail. And then, yeah, we got Mall coming up pretty soon. Probably another couple of
Ye-
weeks, I think.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's funny. I had realized because I had canceled my Disney Plus and Hulu a little while ago. I forgot about it. I'm like,
No.
oh crap, I got to get that back because I got to be able to review this stuff, right? So I ended up, and just for those of you, I mean, I'm not getting any affiliate money off of this or anything like that, but apparently, and I took advantage of this.
That
It
the
has the
deal?
ads, but yeah, that $4.99 a month for 3 month deal.
Yeah.
Oh
For all
yeah,
three, isn't it?
yeah. Well, for Hulu and Disney Plus, basically what I had before then, I think I was paying. Oh man, it was like around 20. I don't remember if it was a little over 20 or a little under 20, but I basically paid around that for the no ad premium version, which also screened in 4K and Atmos and all that stuff. But the thing was, I've just been trying to like, much like Han Solo, I'm trying to get some of these debts paid off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, man, I got to start, I got to just streamline down and, not forever, but just put a bunch of this extra stuff just, for like 6 months or a
Oh.
year, whatever. Yeah, just long enough to do that, right? Well, the thing is, I started thinking about it like, you know what? I can just, who cares if it has ads and it's not in 4K or Atmos, right? So I'm just like, whatever. I'll just sign back up for it, especially because we got the mall thing. Um, oh yeah, Grandmaster brings up a good point too. He says, don't forget Ahsoka in between those two movies. Yep. So we'll have that too. So yeah, I mean, we got a lot of, we got some Star Wars content that we can look forward to over the next year or two. So, hopefully it all pans out and hopefully Dom is wrong and it doesn't flop and everything's cool.
Right.
And it's actually coming out pretty soon. What was the date? Like May 22nd or something like that? I don't
What?
remember. For Mandalorian and Grogu.
Oh man. Oh yeah. 22nd. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're like 2 months basically away from that. So that's going to be fun. Can't wait to review that. And by the way, we're not doing a non-spoiler review on it. So it's like it's gonna
Right.
come out probably like that Wednesday. A lot of times they'll open on Wednesday. Whether it opens on Wednesday, Friday, whatever, whenever Daryl and I go see it, that Sunday or whenever we do the show, Monday, who knows, right?
We're spoiling it.
Spoils galore.
Spoils the plenty.
Yeah. Because I remember we did that with Rise of, which I think, did we do it with I don't think we did that with any of the other movies. I think the only non-spoiler review we ever did was The Rise of Skywalker. We did that, and then we did the spoiler review, like, because we were doing the 2 shows a week at that point. I think we did, like, the non-spoiler review the day we saw it. We did it, like, a special review or whatever. And
Yeah.
then I think we gave people, like, the weekend or something.
Yep.
Then on that Monday, we did, like, the spoiler review. Yeah, well, whatever. You
Yeah.
guys don't want...
Right.
If you guys hadn't seen it, don't watch our episode. Watch it after you
Go
see it.
see it, then come back and watch it.
Yes. See it right. Not don't ever watch the episode, but just don't watch the episode till after you've seen it. So that should be a lot of fun. I am definitely looking forward to checking that. It's just going to be fun to just see a Star Wars movie in the theater again, man.
I know, right?
I mean, this has been the longest, well, unless you count between Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace, but since everything has come back, this is probably the longest stretch that we've gone without any theatrical Star Wars, at least since Disney bought them. So yeah, this should be fun. All right, well that's gonna wrap it up this week. Who knows what we're gonna talk about next week? You guys are just gonna have to check us out next week and find out. But you could bet one thing: it's going to be Star Wars. It's going to have plenty of discussion. So make sure you check us out. So far, we've actually been able to do the Sunday at 8, which is good. If not, in addition to hitting that subscribe button, which you know you want to do, and hitting the like button, which we really want you to do, make sure you hit the notification bell so that way, whenever we do go live, you will be notified. And with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.